Hi, it's been quite some time since I gave an update on the state of the microblog client. So I thought I'd just show you where I've got up to and what I think we need to do next. And also, obviously, I'm keen to gather your input. So the first thing is I've corrected a number of issues or dealt with a number of issues regarding the actual look and feel of the client. Originally, I think the client didn't work correctly when you switched in and out of minimize and maximize, maximizing the window, etc. Now it does. That took me an unbelievable amount of time to sort that out. But it does work now correctly. The other thing, which is probably the biggest change of everything to do with this code, is that it's now split into two threads, a front end and a back end, and there's a database involved. So before I get into all of that, I think we should step back and remind, in case you're watching this and thinking, what the heck is this about? I just want to remind everybody what we're doing here. So we're looking at this concept that Oscar Hotel 8 Sierra Tango November came up with, Julian, which is the concept of microblogging. So you can catch up with where we are with the microblog server by having a look at a previous video, and I'll stick a link in this one about here in the video. Okay, so to communicate with that microblog server, and microblogs are simply just small bits of information. So you can see here we've got a microblog that talks about the amateur satellite Falconsat 3, and that has been pulled off of a server. So the client has gone to the server, grabbed the information off the server and pulled it back over JS8. So that's an important aspect of this. So let's and we could do that just by in fact, you can see here where I have been doing just that, and this is a real live conversation with a server using JS8Call. So we can use JS8Call to do this, but there are some limitations. The first thing is that if you type in, it is based around some commands, and so you have commands like m.l24, which would give you a listing information for blog number 24 or post 24 on a certain blog. That works fine, but the only trouble is that the only way that's validated is you have to send that command across a slow JS8Call link. The server serves it up pretty quickly, but then there's a transfer back, which then takes more time, and so it'll be something like 60 seconds before you know that you've typed in the wrong thing. So if I were to, for example, type in the wrong command, then it'll be 60 seconds before you know you've typed in the wrong command. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that so we want a degree of validation on our commands in our client. The second thing is, by having a client, we can add a lot more functionality, and particularly I'm interested in caching, which I'll go on to explain in a second. And also things like what I'll refer to as compaction and tokenization, compacting the data and recurring words and words that are already in a dictionary, representing those words by, say, 3 digits, so that you can then cut down the amount of time it takes to transmit the data. So there's all sorts of things we can do, and also simplifying the interface actually and making it much easier to use. So let's talk about validation to start with. The first thing is that Down here you see the command line interface, which would be the equivalent of this box here in JS8Call, and you can put in list 24, and that looks good. And I hit enter, and actually what will happen is that will pop up in this QSO box, and then it'll process it, and I'll talk about the processing in a second. If I put it, oh, and the other thing I've added in here is it's much more capable of dealing with different sorts of formats. The fact it just disappears like that doesn't really tell you the full story, but believe me, if you put in the wrong thing, you'll know, which I'll show you in just a second. So we can do things like list everything after 20, 23, 02, 22, and that all works correctly. And we can do list, and we can mess around with the spacing. It doesn't matter about the spacing, it's much more forgiving in that way, and that all works. But if I put in the wrong thing and I hit enter, I get the box is highlighted in pink, and it doesn't send the command. So then we got the opportunity to go back and correct the command. So we've got that a certain degree of validation of the commands. Of course, if I do a listing, if I try and go and get, for example, if I try to get a blog entry from this blog here, M0PXO, and I specify a number like 99, and if that doesn't exist, it's still going to take a trip across the network and to come back to tell me that that doesn't exist. Now there is some, I could add functionality, because if you look over here on the right hand side, which has got a lot of information about announcements from that blog, M0PXO, last time it was seen was on the 10th of the 2nd. This is all a bit out of date because this is sample data, but you can see that it said the latest post ID is 29, so I could have actually validated get 99 against that post data there and said, hang on, you can't send that because there isn't a 99 blog number 99 on that particular microblog server. So we've got a degree of validation. The other thing is that you can switch around, so you can see this is being directed to M0PXO, and in just the same way as in JS8Call, you can direct the input, can't you, by selecting. Let's blank that out. Yeah, you can see if I keep switching around in here, it's directing the outgoing message to a different place. So that's just the same here in this client. Probably the only difference is, and this is a big difference, is you notice that blog names don't have to be dedicated. They don't have to be the same as the station name that's serving them up. That's to accommodate future capabilities, such as you see here, where the news in English is available via 2 different stations. And in fact, what I have in mind is that you would select, it wouldn't matter which one you selected, it would actually send your request to the one that had the best signal to noise ratio. So even if I had that one selected and I typed in get blog 36, which is the latest one available on there, it would well, there's a thing, 36 and 35, so let's go for 35 anyway. It would choose the other station because it's got a better signal to noise ratio. Now we could have that as being a selectable setting, obviously if I go for 36, it's going to have to go to this station here because it's the only one that's actually telling you that it's got 36 available. So you can see how we can add in much more intelligence into this. Other things that I plan are to, when we get a listing like this, this will be a hotspot in the listing, and if you click on there, it will immediately go and get blog 23 from M0PXO. So it'll go and get post ID 23, sorry, from M0PXO. Over here on the left hand side, we've got blogs that have or postings that have been seen on various blogs, not directed to us, but actually directed to other people, but they've been seen in the activity window in here. So we've seen other stations receiving blog information, and that will appear over here. But that neatly brings me on to a real big benefit we have here, and I'll have to explain the design of this to you to explain the benefit. If we have a quick look at the design, this is how we've got this working. We've got a front end thread that is just running the user interface, so it's just dealing with presentation of information. There's no logic, or very little logic in here. And then we've got a back-end thread that deals with all of the logic of the program and the comms. The front end, when you make a change on the front end, it sends a message to the back end, and the back end responds and says, yeah, I've done that. That's okay. I've processed that. If that results in any update to the interface, so any change in frequencies, call signs, any of this information here, any of this here, any of these selections here, that actually causes an update to the database. The back end updates the database, and then the front end reloads that area. So for example, when I'm doing this, that is actually causing it to send a message to the back end. The back end changes the selected blog in the database, and the front end reloads it. Now the reason that I've done it that way, and the reason that's so powerful, is because you can see that if I have code that listens to the JS8Call activity box, I can just keep pushing information into the database and cause the front end to reload that information, which means that this information down here is continuously being populated, and more information is being added. But the really neat thing is, of course, that if the backend sees an actual blog message, a blog post, like it sees this one here for Falconsat 3, if it sees that being sent to another user, it can actually stick it in the database, which means it can cache it. And if I subsequently go and get post, what number is that? That would be, so I need to go to M0PXO. This is blog 25. If I do a get 25, I don't have to go to the server. When I enter that, it's just going to grab it out of the cache and just immediately display it without having to do any form of radio comms. So you can see that I could actually leave this running overnight, and I believe I can legally, and not break any rules, because it's just listening, I can leave this running overnight. It can gather loads of information and populate the database. And if I come to it in the morning and I see something that interests me, like this thing here, I'll be able to click on this. It will immediately grab it out of the database and display it in the QSO window here, in this QSO pane. So this is going to be the trick to this, is making it as fast as we possibly can by using things like caching, using what I'll call compaction or tokenization of data, where we represent whole words with, say, 2-digit codes. So instead of having to send a whole word across the radio link using JS8, we'll just use a code, which will then grab the word out of a locally stored dictionary. So there's lots of things we could do here by having the client available to us. The final thing I wanted to tell you about was that this code is available in my Git repository. So if you go to GitHub/Paul Offord, let's just take that out. That will bring you to here. If you click on the repositories button or link, you'll see these two repositories. This one is the server, which we look at in the other video, which I'll link to. And this one is the client code that I'm working on. So you can go into this repository. It's got many more files. As you'll notice, this is a bit more of a complex coding challenge, particularly for me, as I haven't written a UI style program before. So yeah, this is a bit more challenging. So you can come into here and you can grab this code. If you use Git, then obviously you'll just do git clone, and there's the HTTP link for the clone. If you don't use Git, then you can just download this as a zip file and unpack it, and that will give you the same code. Once you've unpacked it, you will need to run this db setup script, and you'll simply do that. Let's see if I can get a command line. Let's show you how you do that. Don't worry about where I've got this load. You can load this where you want, but this is where my code resides. So you can do. You can see here we've got db setup, and all you would do is type in Python db_setup .py, and it'll set you up set this all up. The only other thing you'll have to change, and I'm thinking on my feet here, is this db root file. Let's have a quick look at that. I'll have a look at it in here. It simply specifies where your database is going to reside. So you'll need to set this to an appropriate location for your PC. So the order to set this up is edit db root and set the location of the database. Run this script. I'm not going to run it because it'll mess everything up for me, but run this script and then simply run mb client. So mbclient.py, and that will start up the client. The other thing is, when the client's running, and you can see where I started it here, it does produce all of this stuff. This is just me throwing some output out while I'm testing. But basically what you're looking at here are the messages that are flowing backwards and forwards between the front end and the back end, and it's checking for reloads. Yeah. I think that's it. I don't think there's much more I can tell you for the moment. The scan button still goes red when you click it, but it doesn't actually do anything. Just to be clear, at the moment there is no comms in place between the back end and JS8Call. So what that means is you don't have to have JS8Call running to start this client. So all I'd ask of you is that if you have any feedback, good or bad, either send a message on the JS8Call mailing list, post something on the JS8Call Facebook page or Facebook area, or add a comment to this video in YouTube. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll try and update you all soon when I've got a bit more to tell you.